Oh, hello there. I guess I don't need that. We finished sanitizing here. Don't ingest this stuff. I hear it's really bad. Muy mal. So it's been a while since I've done a Nooner Conversations because there ain't much conversating going on. We're not meeting in coffee shops, not meeting in offices, but that doesn't mean the world stops. And in fact, the world continues, perhaps even at a very different and perhaps accelerated pace. Things are changing constantly in the political world, in the policy world. And the question is, how do we adapt to it? And so I have two longtime friends on today's Nooner Conversation, Roger Salazar and Hilary McLean of Alza Strategies. And we talk about media consumption. And our audience has changed because, as Roger points out, he's got two college students upstairs studying away because they're home from college, but their classes continue. Not having a face-to-face Nooner conversation. We're doing it over Zoom. I had to learn how to use Zoom today. My former community college colleagues are learning how to use it for their statewide meetings right now. Legislative committees are talking about using Zoom or similar services, not trying to endorse any particular one. But the fact is that we're being forced to adapt and change, and it may change us permanently. Some for good, some not so good. Obviously, there's a human tragedy out there we never want to ignore, but we can also acknowledge that there's this change that's happening in how we consume media, how we communicate to our audiences. And that's a conversation we have today. Is readership going up in newspapers or going down? You might be surprised. Are people watching television news? You might be surprised. We get into all of these topics. We also talk about what happens when the legislature comes back. Practically, how does it change? The Assembly is scheduled to come back on May 4th. The Senate maybe mid-May. We haven't figured out the logistics yet, and I'm not sure that they have, but I know the conversation's going on. So we talk about some of these things. We talk about how the dynamics of a legislative office staff between the Senate, or between the Capitol office and the district office, that might change. No longer might be a conference call where you can go off and do a crossword puzzle or go to the bathroom without everybody else knowing, because they might be looking in your eyes and seeing that your little Zoom window is empty. That changes things. So it's going to be an interesting time after we emerge, and we will emerge from this. And I hope you and your family and your friends are all doing well, as I write repeatedly. Mine are doing well, blessedly. And, we are going to get through this. We don't know exactly the timeline, and it's not really up to humans at this point. Humans are working hard to figure it out, and hopefully we'll crack that code sooner rather than later. But we will come out of it changed, and that's okay. So I hope you enjoy this Nooner conversation. Certainly give us feedback. Give me feedback, scottlay@gmail.com, scott@scottlay.com. They all go to the same place. Twitter, Scott Lay. Facebook, Scott Lay. I think Instagram is Scott in Sacktown or something like that. Anyway, enjoy this conversation with Roger Salazar and Hilary McLean from Alza Strategies. Hey, Roger. Hey, Hilary. How you doing?
Good, Scott.
Great.
Thanks for having us.
My pleasure. I sorry that we can't be sharing a nice pastrami sandwich or something, and but keep your germy paws off me.
I didn't know if we needed to wear masks for that podcast or not either. So
mine's in the laundry.
So yeah. Again, thanks for having us. We just sort of wanted to take an opportunity to sort of give you an update on sort of what we've been up to, and let your a lot of the folks who listen to you and your podcast and this Zoomcast, get a sense of sort of what life is like in the PR world with COVID-19.
Well, and it's a perfect timing because I'm getting a flood of emails and other information some are very relevant. Obviously, you have the May special elections in Congressional District 25 and Senate District 28. So those are relevant, but I
Right.
also am getting communications about the November election. I'm like, I know my sister down in Simi Valley, now she's in CA 25, but she doesn't want to be hearing about November issues right now. She's the director of HR for a restaurant chain that's trying to deliver and provide takeout.
Yeah,
Maybe
exactly.
other than the big issue in November that people are biting their
Well,
fingers,
yeah, there's
fingernails
there's
over.
there's that issue, and
Yeah.
we may be recording over today's press conference, which but I guess today's press conference, the wind was sucked out of the sails this morning, since the president made it clear he was just being sarcastic about injecting
Sure.
Sure.
Clorox.
Yeah.
I went out and bought my Clorox.
I mean, there's a run on Clorox. I mean, first it was toilet paper,
And
and food.
hydrochloroquine. And
Yeah, yeah. Now they say don't use that. So it's a wild world, and that's why I think we wanted to have this podcast and talk. So first, I've been watching a lot of TV, and by watching, that means it's on over there.
Right.
It's I look over occasionally and say, make sure that Governor Newsom's hair looks good today. It always does.
Always
Always does.
Newsom at noon, he's rocking it. And I'll tell you, even my dad, a good old Republican in Orange County, he's kind of like, hey, that Newsom guy's doing a pretty good job. And my dad, that President Trump guy is not doing such a good job. But, that's the dynamics. And you put yourself out there 7 days a week. As the president is, Gavin's been doing 6 days a week. But, what do you think the average voter is watching those noontime press conferences?
I don't think so. I think obviously those of us who are involved in the 6 blocks around the Capitol, are paying very close attention to it. I get briefings and updates from other lobbying firms around town who send us, within 5 minutes after the governor's done, a rundown of what happened, in his press conference. I think for the most part, people are paying attention to the news. The viewership is up, and I know that the readership is up when it comes to the news, but they're not necessarily watching those briefings live. They're using a lot of social media. They're watching a lot of television, news, the CNN, your Fox News, those sorts of things. And Facebook viewership, people are getting a lot of their news on Facebook and social media, which
Scary.
surprising and scary at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
The interesting thing though is like that advertising revenue is while you've got more eyeballs watching the media right now, advertising revenue from what Pew was talking about is down. So that's either a project. Again, with higher viewership, you'd think you'd have higher advertising, but there's also a product of a lot of companies are cutting back because they're shut down or locked down. So you see a lot of those revenues dropping.
I think a lot of those.
Also, their customers can't get to them as much in many cases. So, like, why spend your advertising dollars now? But you're both right in that people are watching the news. They may not be tuning into the governor's briefing exactly, but they want to know what he said, and they're checking their news multiple times a day. I think viewers are also getting used to paying for news that they may not have in the past. They're subscribing to local and national publications, and it'll be interesting to see if some of these trends are habit forming once we're past COVID-19.
That's interesting. And then on the advertising, you have to wonder, are all those car advertisements paying retail?
Yeah.
I mean, all of a sudden you have all these advertisements. They're not, they're not selling cars. That's what people are saying, how generous GM and Ford were to turn over their assembly lines to make ventilators. I'm like, well, they're not making cars.
Yeah.
I mean,
No,
it's a good time to buy a car, though, if you want one right now.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah, there's lots of zero interest offers right now. So if you basically want to borrow their money to buy a car, now's the time to do it.
But I mean, you see, even like Sacramento Bee, obviously, this week we've seen we've seen a sense of desperation almost.
Yeah.
It sounds almost like a going out of business sale
Yeah.
And
Have you donated? I've got my. I'm gonna give a little bit there, just to give back, obviously. But yeah,
yeah.
you're exactly right.
I mean, I'm a paid subscriber to all of them, but yeah, I mean, the B and we just heard that, one of their political reporters is leaving for North Carolina. That was yesterday, was announced. I mean,
I saw that, Brian
it,
Anderson.
yeah. So it's a tough time. It's a horrible time for advertising. I've been fortunate to get a few, but and I don't recruit advertising, but even the B furloughed all their sales staff. I mean, it was like,
Well,
well,
they
you're not
can't
going to get ads.
can't go out and make pitches, and I, it's interesting for me, for us, I think, because of the business that we're in. A lot of this stuff is personal one-on-one relationships. You either it's not just picking up the phone and calling reporters or emailing reporters. It's going to have coffee with them. The press conferences that you see now with the governor are all virtual. They're all, the reporters are dialing in and have to press one to ask a question, which is very, very strange. But it's a different way of doing things. And again, when you don't have that, that personal connection that a lot of those sales staffs need, then all of a sudden they get laid off.
Well, and this ties into an item I wrote about yesterday or a couple of days ago, maybe, about the likely and certainly the end for 2020 of large conventions and conferences. And several of the big tech industry conferences, conventions are suggesting they may never come back.
Right.
It's going to change the way, you're not going to, Salesforce is not going to be shutting down all of downtown San Francisco and setting up big stages and that sort of thing.
Right. Although they had moved to Las Vegas, I think, already, but still, your point.
Yeah, I think they moved to Vegas, but I think even they may be reconsidering future large gatherings. And I think whether the attendees want to go or not is a whole different question than the money deciders saying, wait a minute, you did okay in 2020.
Yeah.
Go make the sales pitch on site.
Well, that's exactly it. And I think we're also sort of finding out as much, one of the things that we've been fortunate of is that, we've continued to be busy, through this season, the virtual, what do you call it? The virtual video chatting sites, have been tremendous. Where we all used to have conference calls, we're all now Zooming and having video chats, and it seems to be working. For us, it's actually interesting because we actually as a company, as a PR firm, are meeting more regularly now in the lockdown than we were in person, which is neat. And we'll see how it changes, but it's for us. We've taken this time to sort of make this a kind of a change some of the way we do things, taking the opportunity to sort of reevaluate ourselves. We're having, much more, I think we're much more in tune with each other in our firm than we were, prior to this. It's kind of neat.
And I've heard that actually from some of my former community college colleagues that are deans that have and they're like, I'm busier than ever. I've got like Zoom meetings all day long. Right. Does this change campaigns?
A little bit, and again, one of the things, one of the reasons we're still active right now is we are working. We have, we are the political consultants for the California Latino PAC, which, and one of the candidates that we're supporting is Elizabeth Romero in SD28. So we're running advertisements, social media advertisements, digital advertisements for her in SD28 on Facebook, on YouTube. But we had to change things a little bit because normally in that area, in that district, that's a great billboard area.
Right.
Nobody's driving. So no,
that's a good point.
Let's, they're cheap. If you want to buy billboard ads, you can do it. And there's a thought that's like, well, people are still going to grocery stores and they're still going, to the gas station. So maybe around those areas, but you do have to.
But they're not driving on the. Let's see. Is that the 10 or the 91 there?
Either way, yeah. On the 10
both
or the
sides.
They're not. So it's all right. Well, where are people, consuming their information? And again, we found that for our value, let's do it on digital because we know they're on their phones, we know they're on their tablets, we know they're getting their news on their computers, maybe some cable as well.
So on
And
that,
connecting with friends over Facebook and other, online social media platforms more than ever.
well, and so on that point exactly, Hillary. So the volume's gone way up.
Mm-hmm.
Is does that mean is performance down because you have more users that are going on explicitly to connect with, you may have more people, more unconventional family members that are using Facebook specifically to talk to other family members, and
Mm-hmm.
may not be as attuned to ads, or I just haven't paid attention to ad performance for several years on
Well,
that
we're
front.
gonna we're gonna have to sort of take a look at that. One of the things that in some of the test runs that we did in the last couple of weeks leading up to this the ad buys that we made for Romero, it was to take a look at at what had been happening in the interim period, and I know, like I said, the fact that more people are on the platform means that you're actually getting more, more eyeballs on your ads for fewer dollars. So it's gotten cheaper to advertise on Facebook. It seems sort of counterintuitive, but you're getting more bang for your buck right now.
But it changes the ad you want to run,
Yes.
because you want, and this is the same thing,
Yeah.
my advertisers, sometimes I'll get an ad. I'm like, I could get you a decent click through,
Right.
but you really, if you're going to advertise, you're going to pay to advertise in the nooner, your message should be clear
That's right.
in
You
that
can't be
300 by
tone deaf
250.
in this crisis. You really need to have your tone attenuated to the fact that people are living their lives differently, and that they are, worried, and they don't know when this is going to end, and they're worried about their health. So the tone is really important for
Right.
advertising and for messaging.
And you just may not get a click through, but if you can
Mhm.
make your message, you're not paying for your message if you're not having that click through.
Right.
So sell up front,
Mhm.
and
I think that's exactly right. You do have to tailor it, a little bit broader than what you normally would in an election like this special, for example. When you have a Republican versus a Democrat in an area like out in Riverside County, for example, Parkview, especially on the English side, we're doing English and Spanish ads, but on the English side, you don't want to annoy some of those middle of the road voters, by going too left in your ads, for example. But on the Spanish side, you can do it a little bit more. You can be a little bit more aggressive. You can be a little more anti-Trump, for example. But you do have to take into account that audience is bigger than you had before, and you got to be sensitive to it.
So you're talking about the special and working on the special right now. I, on my television recently, I've seen ads for ballot measure in November.
Wow.
And the last I looked at the calendar, it's April right now. And, I know my family members that are not political. Well, I don't even want to think about November right now.
Yeah.
I'm looking at daily numbers of deaths and cases and ICU admissions and all of this stuff. Is it even worth it to be doing voter facing work for November right now? Or is it really should it be focused on organizing and coalition building, the behind the scenes work that can be done? Obviously, it's a different environment than the three of us. We've been in politics for quite a while.
Right.
We've never seen anything like this.
Yeah. Well, two thoughts. One, it's probably a good bargain right now that it's more affordable.
Right.
And two, their audience may not be the voter. It may be some of their, to support their fundraising goals and their coalition building.
Mhm.
So they may be very well recognizing that it's a part of their long game strategy, and not necessarily moving voter behavior right now in advance of November, but building their operation with infrastructure.
Good point.
And some of it, and the one, somebody, I saw some of these ads, and I think when you go on Twitter and you see the armchair quarterbacks and other folks who are positing, sort of trying to figure out why people are doing what they're doing, there was some sense that from some folks that maybe they're doing this to try to get their polling up. But I wouldn't be polling right now. This is not a good time to be polling.
No.
on anything. So it just struck me. In fact, we had a client that just right before the governor issued a stay-at-home order, when we were about to go into the field with a poll on an issue that they cared about. And once we did the stay-at-home order, we said this just hold off on it. I mean, it's going to be skewed. It's not going to be worth what the money we're putting into it.
And Gavin and legislators, listen to what Roger's saying, because don't believe those favorability numbers that you may have seen this week, because the fact is that people are hugging the flag, embracing themselves in the flag right now, wrapping themselves in the flag.
Yeah,
exactly. I think it's not switching over to me because I have an external microphone, so it's okay. I'll just be the voice from God.
It's all fine.
All good. So what do you think the split is? Ratings are hard because, technically if I had a box measuring, my content, or actually they do, because, Xfinity feeds it back.
Right.
But it's sitting over there. I've got Facebook here. Facebook is open on my computer right now. I've got you all in front of me. How do you make these judgment calls as to where to, how do you, where the attention actually is? I mean, you could do it online. You could do it based on performance.
Right.
But audience is really hard to measure.
No, and I've got to think it's got to be tricky for for Nielsen, for Arbitron, for any of those folks who are doing this stuff. It's got to be tricky for them to figure out sort of how people are looking at it, because this is a multitask generation. The more people are multitasking their media than ever before. So they are, like you said, they're looking at their phone in one hand, maybe scrolling through Instagram and Twitter. Got their TV on with a smart app on it that's flashing up news headlines on the side, or updates as they go along while they've got their laptop open too. I've got I've got 2 kids in college right now who are home and doing online remote learning, from upstairs. So you've got 2 universities in my upstairs house right now. But I look at them as sort of the barometer for how they consume things, and they've got everything on. A laptop, the phone, the television, satellite radio in the background. So it's a little bit of everything right now. It's got to be hard for those folks.
And what is, I read so much about, the binging that's going on. And I see people saying, I binged everything already. And, once they've watched Tiger King, they're like, oh God, what do I do next? And
I'm still resisting. I won't do it.
I'll say it's kind of worth it. I did it, even I have to get away from the news. But what so I haven't, actually looked at the new, I look at late night ratings. That's kind of,
right.
But I haven't looked at like local news ratings. So, is that still predominantly the older demographic, or are younger people that are home now at 5 o'clock, let's say, that they wouldn't have been home before, they would have been commuting before, are they watching local news? Do we know that?
Well, they are. I mean, what we've seen, at least according to Nielsen, again, there's 60% increase in media consumption because folks are staying at home. A lot of that is on the local side. So you've seen a lot of extra, extra eyeballs on local news. They're getting a little bit of an upsurge with younger folks, but younger folks are still much more likely, to be getting their news on social media than those who are 55 plus, for example. But again, the good news for news, as Hilary mentioned earlier, is that young people are starting to pay for news, which they weren't before. They're now, according to the World Economic Report, they're twice as likely to pay for news than their older counterparts.
Now, is that as in newspapers or
subscriptions or
news sites? Mm-hmm. It'll also be interesting to see the Netflix stock prices after this. They're a major winner, and other streaming sites.
Yeah, they had huge.
And we don't have stocks in them, just so you know.
Yeah, full disclosure.
It's I had advertising revenue come in January, and I kind of parked it for a little while. I'm like, I'm like, oh, well, and I did 60% in bonds to be safe,
Right.
because this is income to last for a while. And then I'm like, okay, Square is everywhere. Yeah, nobody's using Square. I
Yeah.
use Square for payments, but nobody's going to coffee anymore and buying,
Right.
swiping. But I did Procter and Gamble. I'm like, okay, that is like your traditional, a recession-proof stock.
Right.
Nothing was.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, again, if you had gotten the briefings in Congress like some of those Republican legislators and put your money in Zoom and all these virtual meetings.
My understanding is some Democratic legislators, including some from within California,
Right.
I wasn't going to
game
bring those
too.
up, Scott.
I know. It's my job these days.
Fair enough.
So,
Yeah.
so they're paying for news. So younger folks are paying for news.
Yeah, it's and again, it's very interesting. It's not just for news. What that same study is, Hilary, wasn't it? They're also paying for entertainment as well.
That's right. Yeah, the streaming sites, online games, all sorts of, platforms that they have to pay for to stay occupied, be entertained.
Match.com, OkCupid.com, Tinder, Grind. I don't even.
Yeah. Remember, Scott, we were the Napster generation. We were stealing music, before, when and refusing to pay for it. I think the younger generation has decided these artists deserve something and are starting to pay for it now.
Ironically, the peak of that was when I was in law school, and I was taking like, IP law and internet and the law and all of that.
When was the last time you saw an FBI warning before a program? Remember how that used to be?
That was on VHS tapes.
Right. Now, on a less humorous note, it'll be also interesting to see on the other end of this, as more people are paying for news. What is that gap of information going to be for people who can't afford to pay for online news sources? And what does that look like? And how are people going to communicate with them? How are we going to communicate with people who aren't going to online paid news sources? And what's the gap, the information gap that occurs and grows over time?
And that's a good question, because you get, folks stepping into the void and through the nonprofit arena. So Cal Matters, obviously. Politico is still, a free model in California for most of their content, but
and outrageous for their pro content.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Reeling you in.
how well did that work for Sacramento Bee with Capital Alert? Remember when Capital Alert was separate? Anthony York was with Capital Alert before it was folded into the Bee, and then they tried to charge a super premium, and people are like,
well, I always tell these reporters, like, look, if your stuff is hidden, like there's a reasonable paywall, I'll pay my $4.99 a month, or whatever it is per year, but when you start getting into the 5 figures, 6 figures, it's like, all right, well, nobody's going to read your story.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Except a very select few.
Well, do you have some other insights? I've kind of run through some of my topics that I wanted to know about. I'm wondering on this paying for content. I mean, among young people, I'm trying to figure that out. I mean, are they doing it to read about the new coronavirus, COVID-19? Because there's not much else going on.
Yeah,
I mean, they're not reading the sports page.
No, and it's interesting because again, and I have when you have teens and young adults, you're sort of seeing what they're paying for. My son, for example, is paying for a lot of gaming applications and gaming content, gaming forums. Because he's a college senior with one class left to graduate. So he's got a lot of time, so I do think it's paying. Somebody paying for Netflix or paying for the Hulu Plus, to be able to consume more of that, because they've got a little more time on their hands. If everybody's stuck at home and can't go to the park or anything like that, it's all right. Well, I think I'll pay the extra $9 for this.
Well, I think Disney sure made the right decision. Yeah. Their timing, if anybody had advance notice of all of this, I mean, because you have all these kids at home,
Well,
And it's like Disney Plus.
you'll notice they were okay closing. It took them just a couple of nudges, but they were fine closing their parks.
And paying their employees for what, 6 weeks after they closed them or something.
Exactly.
I mean,
Look, I think for us, it's going to be interesting to sort of we talked about before. You have these these stay-at-home orders impacting the way people consume their media, but it's also obviously impacting the way the legislature is working. We're all following sort of what goes on there. They had their first hearing last week. And as you noted, Scott, in your reporting, they had a little trouble with the with the load. Of folks. They had to delay the start of it because too many people were signing on. It's going to be that everybody's going to think, all right, well, if this is going to be sort of a new sort of norm, we're going to have to beef up all of our IT equipment and make sure this stuff works. I'm actually surprised for us, knock on wood, we haven't had this thing freeze on us so far, which happens every once in a while.
Well, I joked on social media yesterday that there needs to be like a little thing on the bottom of the screen for all of these WebEx and Skype and Zoom in on the broadcast, the cable news shows that says what internet service provider they're using. Because it's like, it's a total bandwidth check. And so thank you, Xfinity. You've been pretty good for me,
Right.
Exactly.
But I also think this will be also habit forming. We won't have conference calls in the future. People will continue to do Zooms. I think they really are liking the ability to see each other and react to each other physically, not just by voice. And then the legislature, this may change the way they do operations. We don't have the Cal channel anymore. I mean, terrible time for them to have closed their doors, unfortunately. But, now with the internet, people are going to be tuning into hearings and not just watching, but interacting and finding new ways to have meetings with legislators without having to come all the way to Sacramento.
Well, you don't have people sitting there like on a conference call writing notes down and that sort of thing, or
especially when we're looking at each other.
Right. And you also know when we're talking here, that I'm not, not saying that I was on a PPIC call yesterday and I was doing New York Times crossword puzzle on another tab. I was, looking at Twitter in a third tab. Yeah. It's far more interactive and it's recording.
Right.
And so instead of taking notes, you have a recording of it. You're like, what did Roger say? What did Hilary say?
Right.
And you can go back and look at it and hold the other person accountable.
This is true.
And again, it's for us, it's been good. Again, it does help you keep on task, keep on track, with what you're trying to do. And I really do feel in a strange way, we've been much more productive, in these last 6 weeks than we have been in a while. And, I kind of like it. I miss going and interacting with people one-on-one and going out for coffee with folks and doing the social aspect of it. But I do like that this has changed a little bit and actually helped us, be a little bit better at what we do.
Well, and you're more productive.
Yeah.
There was a study out, was it this morning, yesterday? I don't know, every day kind of runs together. If it ends with DAY, then it's the same day, right?
Right.
That said that people are on average working 3 hours a day more while they're teleworking.
Yeah.
But when you go to have coffee, you walk to have coffee, you stop, you talk to somebody about the 49ers game, sorry. The Giants game, sorry.
That's all right.
And, you spend so much more time on that sort of thing as opposed to switching tasks. And ideally, we figure this out, and that means that we get our work done more efficiently, and then we can have more personal time, more time with family, more time to pursue leisure. So it doesn't have to be either more work or not, but, more of a balance, I think,
Right.
You just become more efficient.
Right. Although you lose
lack
the
of conferences.
serendipitous nature of our work around the Capitol, which is running into each other and having opportunities to collaborate that we didn't anticipate. But I do think, to Roger's point, we've learned a lot about what we can do under these circumstances, and so offices may never be the same.
Yeah.
Well, just think about legislative offices, and obviously we've all spent a lot of time with them. You know, the conflict between the capital office and the district office, particularly when you have multiple district offices.
Mhm.
Well, you now have one office.
Yeah.
They didn't think about that. Most of them didn't think about that before. Now, I mean, you'd have a conference call, but again, somebody's doing New York Times crossword puzzle or
Right.
whatever while the conference call, and Scott, oh yeah, I'm here. You know, I mean,
Also think about, again, you're adding to your day an hour on both ends for commutes, which for a lot of people, sometimes longer for other folks. You're right. The lot of sort of the extra time that gets wasted walking from place to place, et cetera. I also imagine that if for a Capitol staffer, a lot more comfortable to be at their kitchen table than it is to be crammed with like 6 other people in some of those tiny spots, especially if you're in the doghouse. It's you can probably feel a little bit more productive without everybody being on top of each other.
So, okay, and this wasn't the purpose of our conversation, but you both have enough experience on this front. So what happens with the legislature? The assembly is supposed to come back on May 4th as originally planned. The Senate has removed May 4th as a date, and the word is mid-May, but
Right.
clearly that is uncertain at this point. The assembly looks to be moving forward with committee hearings the week of May 4th and sticking with the original deadlines. What happens? June 15th is the one thing that has to happen.
Yeah, I think you're going to get a lot more virtual interaction, as a result. I mean, I think there's still going to be some people who want to go and meet with folks, but given sort of where we are, and I think that the leanings that we have in this state, you're still going to have a lot of people who don't want to. A lot of staffers who aren't going to want to meet with lobbyists in person. Especially at close quarters until they're assured that everything is safe. So I think you're going to sort of see that virtual legislature in action. You're going to see a reduced workload, or you've already heard from the assembly that you better prioritize your bills, because we're not going to, just have thousands of them, going through. So maybe it makes that process a little bit more efficient too.
Right. Well, and the assembly is coming back in a very streamlined way with, I think each office can have one staffer in the office, and the rest are going to continue to work remotely. So some of those remote interactions with that they do with the public, with lobbyists, is going to continue. Also, Sacramento County just indicated that they want all of the legislators to get tested before they come back. And so as testing gets more widespread and available to everyone, I think that will also filter people back to some sense of normal, whatever normal was before. But until testing is really widespread, we're going to be very much in this, distance, remote, using technology to connect.
But the point is they make about testing is, unless you're doing it every couple of days, it's somewhat moot. A point in time testing today is useless on Monday. And today's Friday when we're recording this.
Yeah. Unless you don't see anybody else in those 3 days.
What's your bubble boy from Seinfeld?
Right. The one legislator per plane flying up on Southwest.
Yeah, I mean, the life of a legislator is, if none of them have had it so far, and I have no information on that, but if none of them had it, it's a miracle.
Absolutely.
Based on what we know.
Mm-hmm.
And based on how they normally interact. I mean, they're just, in touch with the public, to a high degree. So yeah, I'm surprised, to be honest with you.
So if they come in, do you think that does the assembly do if the state is still shut down, does the assembly do the budget vote at like the Sheraton or something?
I think they're going to have to find a big spot. I mean,
you basically have to do it because, I mean, if you're telling my dad that he has to stay home, you tell my sister that their restaurants can't be, and then you have on the nightly news that you're saying more people are watching, all these legislators packed in and staff packed in to a chamber that for state of the state can accommodate 120, but you can't space them out by 6 feet.
Well, maybe they'll vote in stages. They'll send, A through F in, cast your vote.
That's what the And that's what the House of Representatives did yesterday
Mm.
for the second tranche of PPP.
Yeah. I think they're gonna have to do something like that. So they're gonna have to get really creative about it. And if there's anybody who's creative and reads from a lot of different case studies, it's Speaker Rendon. He's always sort of looking at new ways in which to do things. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out.
It definitely will be. Well, it's been a great nooner conversation with Hilary McLean and Roger Salazar, partners in Alza Strategies. Thank you so very much. You be safe, be well. And I do look forward, and in a normal year, I wouldn't say I do look forward to legislature being back to normal and us all being over there. But I do look forward to things being back to normal and interacting in person with people.
Absolutely.
But we're staying in touch, and thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having us, Scott. It was a
My
great
pleasure.
conversation.